There are two ways to watch this movie. You can watch it as an intellectual, searching for hidden depths, themes, and layers that aren't there, or you can turn your brain off and enjoy watching a big thing hit another big thing. Welcome to Sandwich Reviews. I'm the Talking Sentient Sandwich, and I thought this movie was alright. Not that I was going in expecting the greatest movie ever made, but I was expecting the same thing that 2021's Godzilla vs. Kong gave me. An enjoyable experience that was more thought out than would initially appear. And while there is fun to be had, this wasn't nearly as good as some of the movies that came before it. The cinematography, the story, and the world that they set the movie in is all sorely lacking any grounding. I mean, there's another world beneath the crust of this planet, so it's definitely not real, but the humans' technology is just future sci-fi stuff. I understand they were able to create Mechagodzilla a few years ago, but it seems like the machinery in this movie can just do anything. The characters also constantly spell out exactly what they think and feel as if it was necessary information that wasn't already obvious. And plot holes are abound in this story. And then the movie goes and depicts the communication between Kong and some others really well. Other than some sparsely used sign language, that's all dialogue free. But even with Kong, it's not great all the time. The worst of the movie was the writers dumbing down almost every interaction and sequence, as if the filmmakers assumed the audience would be lost if they weren't spoon-fed every bit of exposition. I'll cover it much more in depth in the spoiler section, but I also felt like these monsters were never tangibly there on screen. The VFX looked fine and all, but the choice of camera placement just ruined any sense of immersion. Yet this movie was mercifully short, featuring as much kaiju fights as they could pack into it without it being too much. So if you came for big monster punch-ups, definitely check out Godzilla x Kong: A New Empire. I can't promise you won't be bored whenever the human characters are on screen, but I still think it's worth the ticket price for the action alone. But that comes with a lot of caveats, most of which I have already talked about, but let's get into depth with some spoilers. So, spoiler warning. In the first 5 minutes, Godzilla does a massive forward leap into the air, and I immediately knew what I was getting into. There is no weight to any of these creatures, and that really rings true in a section of the third act where they are literally floating around weightless during a fight. And it wasn't like the film looked terrible by any means. As I mentioned before, the CG looks pretty good most of the time. I think this came down to the choice of where they put the camera. Aside from 3 or 4 genuinely great shots, these monsters are filmed as if they were people in suits stomping around a cardboard city. The camera should be on the ground, or on a skyscraper, looking up at these giant behemoths as they lumber around. Yet, not only did all of the kaijus move unrealistically fast, the camera just floated around as if the cameraman was always in a helicopter spectating these fights. It's okay to have those aerial shots, but this movie needed way more on-the-ground cinematography. Maybe this point would have been less important if the monsters actually moved around like they had a heaviness to them, but the overall cinematography still could have been better. As a protagonist, Kong fits well as a lead for this story, but the narrative didn't really work for me. The villain, the Scar King, was kind of interesting, but I couldn't take him seriously. How in the world did Kong never come across him or the other apes before this? Despite 90% of the movie being exposition, they left that key piece of info out. Or I just missed the explanation. Either way, the villain wasn't as good as the trailer let on. Aside from 1 or 2 nasty looks he gave Kong, there wasn't much personality behind him. Godzilla was also missing any kind of personality, just kind of being there. There's a reason for it, but I thought it was very weird that Godzilla was rampaging around killing stuff. Besides, that was the same thing they did in the last movie, and it made way more sense then. But the movie was definitely fun enough to deserve being made, and despite all its flaws, I'll still be there for the next installment in the franchise. As always, thanks for watching. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe for weekly videos, and enjoy a delicious sandwich.